Hey, everybody. Welcome to Odd and Untold, the podcast where we discuss all things strange and spooky. And I hope you're all having a great summer. I'm having a pretty good summer so far. It's been very hot here in the New York City area, hot and humid and kind of disgusting. You don't even want to be outside. But yesterday, things kind of broke and it was just like in the low 80s and like no humidity, just beautiful, beautiful weather. So it's been really good to just get outside, and I just feel a little bit rejuvenated just being able to go outside and enjoy the summer a little bit instead of just going outside and having trouble breathing and just sitting in the shade and dripping with sweat when you're not even moving. It's just not a fun summer for me. And I don't mind that weather if I can go in the water, go in the pool, go in the ocean, but most days I'm stuck at home working, and it's not, you know, not fun to have to work in this kind of weather and not be by the water. So again, hope you're all having a great summer. So this week we have a listener submission, a story from a listener in Connecticut who wrote to me. She didn't want to come on the show, which I totally understand. I'm totally fine with, but she was nice enough and kind enough to write out her story. So I'm going to read it for you guys today. A little bit of some weirdness in it, and I will read the story and I'll go over it and kind of give my thoughts and opinions. And of course, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions once you listen to the show or watch the show. So leave your thoughts in the comments below, what you think Gina was experiencing. But I'm going to read that. And before I begin, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the UAP, UFO Congressional Hearings, and what that means for us as Earthlings. I've been as a paranormal person, I have a lot of paranormal friends and paranormal groups that I'm in on social media. And I'm seeing a lot of aliens exist. The truth has now been revealed. Now there's definitive proof that aliens have been visiting us. And if you don't believe that, then you're a conspiracy theorist. And you were wrong all along to doubt it. Wrong. Wrong, wrong, wrong. We do not have proof. We do not have anything approaching proof. We have some interesting tidbits. So I'm going to share my screen here and just talk a little bit about what was discussed in the congressional hearings. And I'm going to give my reasoning for why it's not proof. So I'm not going to get too into it because, again, I don't want this episode to get taken over by this. I just wanted to kind of touch on this briefly before I get into the ghost stories. So I'm going to read from this article where a former military intelligence officer turned whistleblower told House lawmakers that Congress is being kept in the dark about unidentified anomalous phenomenon known as UAPs or UFOs, alleging at a hearing that executive branch agencies have withheld information about the mysterious objects for years. David Grush, who served for 14 years as an intelligence officer in the Air Force and National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, appeared before the House Oversight Committee's National Security Subcommittee alongside two former fighter pilots who had firsthand experience with UAPs. Grush served as a representative on two Pentagon task forces investigating UAPs until earlier this year. He told lawmakers that he was informed of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program during the course of his work examining classified programs. He said he was denied access to those programs when he requested it and accused the military of misappropriating funds to shield those operations from congressional oversight. He later said he had interviewed officials who had direct knowledge of aircraft with non-human origins and that so-called biologics were recovered from some craft. So again, I just want to talk about this real quick. All of his information is hearsay. He didn't see anything. He didn't experience anything. This is all stuff that was told to him from other people. So it's hearsay. This is not admissible in a court of law. This is not proof. And I will give you an example as to why this is not proof. So in my agency, the agency I work for in my job is under the office of the mayor. We're under that umbrella. So in the course of my day-to-day work, say someone came to me who maybe was a little bit higher up, closer to the mayor, and said, "Hey, Jay, I have some information for you. The mayor of New York City is actually a leprechaun, and he just wears a human mech suit every day to work and in public, and but he's really just a leprechaun. And this is definitely true. I know it. Here's some documents saying that he's a leprechaun. Does that mean he's really a leprechaun, or is this guy pulling my leg or purposely deceiving me for some reason for national security or hoaxing me? Whatever the case is, it's not proof. I did not see the leprechaun step out of the mayor's body. I did not see the mech suit that he's with, the human suit that he's wearing. It's hearsay. And while it's very interesting and very tittillating hearsay, it's not proof. You can't go by what this guy is saying as proof. I tend to believe these pilots a little bit more, who have experienced some things. Their names, I'm going to pull up their names here: Ryan Graves and David Fravor. So these guys are Navy pilots. They captured the Tic Tac video and all of that. And they testified that these objects could accelerate at very high speeds. They were unknown designs to us. They didn't seem to be able to do what they were doing. They shouldn't have been able to do what they were doing. So to me, that is much more interesting. That's, again, not proof. It's proof that we don't understand these craft yet. So are these top secret U.S. military craft? They very well could be. Are these top secret foreign aircraft from our enemies or even our allies? They very well could be. There's no proof that they are from another world, from outer space. There's just no proof. It's interesting, but it's not proof. And Grush, again, everybody is kind of fawning over what he said. And while I do think it's interesting, and I'll get to the other aspect of this in a moment of why that there may be something to this, but it's not proof. It's hearsay. It's he heard, someone told him, he read in a document. Where are these documents? Where are these people who talked to him? Where are these people that he interviewed? Oh, I can't tell you. I can only tell you behind closed doors, blah, blah, blah. He has no firsthand knowledge. Again, it's the leprechaun wearing the human suit running New York City. Is Congress going to pay me attention to that? Probably not, because it's kind of ludicrous. Which brings me to why this is interesting. Why is Congress listening to him? Why did they open up these hearings if there's nothing to it? I do think there's something there, but I think it's a piece of the puzzle. I think it's a step in the right direction. I think this is just another piece in a much larger puzzle that brings us one step closer to understanding what may be going on, but it's not proof. So for anybody out there saying this is proof, this is absolute 100% proof that we're being visited by aliens and extraterrestrials and UFOs definitely exist, you're wrong. You're wrong. There's no proof. What we do have is something very interesting. We have someone who's verifiably an intelligence officer. He worked with some higher ups. He was privy to some information. Whether that information is true remains to be seen. Whether that information, is he seeing a cover up? Is he seeing something that the shadow government is putting out there to kind of throw everybody off the trail of what's really going on? Who knows? And again, a lot of people will say that, well, he's swearing under oath, so it must be true. He's swearing to what people told him, which I don't doubt. I'm not saying he's a liar. Far from it. I think he's telling the truth of his truth, what he experienced as far as interviewing people, what he experienced as far as seeing documents. He didn't see any aliens. He didn't see any craft. He has no firsthand experience. That's all I'm saying. But I do think it's interesting that you have these pilots. I think it's interesting that we have the Tic Tac video and other videos from the Navy. I think all of this is fascinating. I think that Congress is even entertaining this is mind-blowing. And I think there's something to it. I just don't think it's proof. I think it is kind of edging us in that direction of eventual proof, of eventual disclosure, but it's not proof. It's not disclosure. We're not there yet. So temper your excitement. Be excited, but it's not proof yet. So I think everybody just needs to kind of take a step back and just appreciate what's happening without jumping to proof that these are extraterrestrial beings, because I don't know if we're quite there yet. And I'm just, I would love to be proven wrong. I would love proof to come out, but we don't have it yet. So we have to kind of pull back a little bit. That's my spiel on the UAP UFO thing. I hate the term UAP because you say it, people are like, oh, what does that mean? UFO. So they're trying to get away from the stigma of UFOs, and then you say UAP and nobody knows what that is. So you got to say, oh, it's it's the new thing for UFO. And people go, oh, okay. Now it's still UFOs. You're just horse of a different color, basically. So, okay, on to the ghost story. I'm going to shift gears here. So those are my thoughts. What do you guys think about the UFO, UAP congressional hearings, David Grush? Let me know in the comments below, because these are my thoughts. I mean, I could be wrong. I would love to be proven wrong, but I don't think this is proof. I think this is one more piece of the puzzle, a step in the right direction, not proof. So there we go. So on to the ghost stories. Okay, so this story, it's actually a series of stories, but this tale was sent to me by a user. I'm going to call her Gina because she didn't want her real name used. Again, she didn't want to come on the show, but she was very nice to just type up her experiences and send them to me. She's from Connecticut. I don't know her. She's just a fan of the show. She heard the show, got my email address, and sent in her story. So I'm going to read it here, and I'll read the entire thing, and then I'll kind of go back piecemeal and sort of talk about what I think may be going on and how I can relate it to other stories we may have spoken about on the show. Okay, so here's what Gina wrote. The house I grew up in was haunted. My father, in the late 60s or early 70s, saw an apparition and other weird things would happen. It was my grandparents' home, and my father, brother, and I moved in when my mom decided she wanted divorce. Little things would happen here and there, like the feeling of being watched, walking around in my room, seeing shadows. One night, I remember waking up terrified. I looked around the room, and sitting in a chair was this hideous, decaying-looking woman. Her eyes were pure white, and her hair was a fiery red. She motioned for me to come to her. I remember her having long fingernails, and when she motioned me to come to her, it was like a weird movement. Like the only way I can describe it was like how actors would move in an old picture film. The air was thick. The last thing I recalled was my head hitting the pillow. I woke the next day just thinking about it. I told my cousin, who was religious, and she said a prayer outside in front of the house. I got sick afterwards and believed it was retaliation from this thing. I couldn't swallow, so I would refuse to eat. My grandma noticed, and I was getting thinner and not eating. She prayed and sprinkled holy water on me. I was finally able to eat. Fast forward to when I was 15 years old. I started to get involved with witchcraft and occult stuff. I was always into the paranormal. I had many books that had spells in it, and one book had summoning spells. My dad also bought me a spirit board. It was a big no-no in the house as my grandparents were really religious. I thought it was a great idea to try it out in the house. I used it, but nothing happened, so I continued to practice spells. At the time, my cousin would come over and play it too. Well, a couple of nights later, something woke me up, growling in my ear. I couldn't move, but could feel a presence there. This happened every night at the same time. I did get the courage to open my eyes once, and standing by my bed, a black hooded shadow figure was there just watching me. After a while, I decided to move across the street. My aunt and cousin lived across the street from us. I thought it would go away and stop, but nope, it followed me there. The same thing would happen. Something would growl in my ear to wake me up, and I couldn't move. I eventually decided to sleep on the floor in my aunt's room for a couple of nights. Well, directly across from her room was the room. That was my bedroom when I lived there. I felt like something was watching me the whole time, and I know it was pissed at me. One night, when I slept in my room at my aunt's house, I was woken up and was not able to move, and when I opened my eyes, I saw two eyes staring down at me. It was glowing with slits like cat's eyes. I started to babysit during the week for my aunt who lives in the town right next to us, and started to sleep over there Monday through Friday. I was happy to stay someplace out, still thinking it was not going to follow me, but it did. The first night when I was trying to fall asleep in the guest bedroom, there was a light above the bed that you had to touch, and it would dim on the first touch, second touch be bright, and third touch would turn the lights off. Well, when I was lying in bed, the light started to act nuts and went on and off and on and off. I noticed the air got thick, so I ran out of the room. But when I closed the door behind me, I had to walk all quietly in the hallway because I didn't want to wake my little cousin up. When I passed his room, I heard whispering coming from it. I assumed it was my cousin talking to himself, so I just tried to listen to what he was saying, but I couldn't understand it. I fell asleep in the living room, and in the morning, I told my aunt that I thought my cousin was up. And she told me he wasn't in his room last night, but was sleeping with her and my uncle the whole night. I realized that this thing was going to follow me everywhere I went, so I decided to move back to my grandparents' home when I wasn't working. One night over there, I was waking up with the growling and not being able to move. My foot was sticking out of the covers. It was the summertime, and something with sharp nails touched my foot. Another night, I slept downstairs because it was the coolest area in my home. I was woken up because I heard footsteps running down the stairs. I thought it was my father, but realized my father and brother went to a camping trip for the weekend. Not being able to move, standing in the doorway was this half-man, half-goat creature. It kept on disappearing and reappearing until it got next to the sofa. It told me to go upstairs and that my grandmother wanted me. I ran upstairs and went to where my grandma was, and she was sleeping. A few days later, my grandmother told me she was having reoccurring dreams about me signing a book with the devil. The activity started to get worse. I would take naps during the day to catch up on my sleep because I was not sleeping at night, while the thing would appear during the day. I was taking a nap and opened my eyes because I felt a presence, and standing by my bed was a thing pretending to be my grandfather. Its eyes were full of hate, and it was very animalistic the way it was standing, not human-like. One Saturday, my other cousin was sleeping over, and I told her about this summoning book, and we did one of the spells. Well, something turned off the fan, and we heard walking around the room where I had to plug back in the fan. It sounded like something with hooves. Eventually, this thing started to wake me up and talk to me. It told me it was going to kill my family and then me. That was my last straw, and I decided to get rid of the board and the book. I threw them in the garbage. That night, I was woken up with the thing telling me it was going to come back. When I got older, I got married and moved out. Periodically, I would have dreams about the half-man and half-goat. Some of the dreams were disgusting. A few years later, we bought a 2-bedroom condo and things were peaceful. When I became 30, I got pregnant with my first child. Second trimester, I would sometimes sleep downstairs on the sofa because my back would hurt. One night, I was woken up and I couldn't move. I could hear something jumping onto the banister and jumped on the couch where I was sleeping. It touched my stomach. I woke up, scared it would hurt the baby, but my baby was okay. When my son was born, he would sleep in his bassinet by my bed. One night, I was laying in bed watching TV, and my son was in his basement. I noticed my TV was blacking out. I looked up, and it was on his head and was growling at something in his room. He looked like he was scared and seeing something. Things here and there would happen, but nothing like what happened when I was 15. I do believe the thing is being dormant. And that is the end of Gina's story. So just want to kind of go through this story. Like I said, I'll go through each paragraph and just kind of give my thoughts as to what I think is going on here. So she says the house she grew up in was haunted. Her father, in the late 60s and early 70s, saw an apparition and other weird things would happen. So right away, you kind of have this history of someone else experiencing something in the house. So I found that interesting. Again, I don't have a lot of follow-up on this, so I'm just presenting the story as it was presented to me. We went back and forth a couple of times over email, but this is the information I have. So little things would happen, she says. The feeling of being watched, hearing something walking around in her room, seeing shadows. These are very common things. This is kind of paranormal experience 101. You sort of hear things, you get a certain feeling, your instincts kind of pick up on it. You feel like you're being watched. You hear something walking around your room. You see shadows out of the corner of your eye. So then she gets into a lot of stories of seeing an entity. So the first one she sees is this hideous, decaying looking woman. So interesting. And she says, her eyes were white, her hair was a fiery red. So she's got this very vivid image of an entity in her room motioning to her. It's interesting that she says how actors would move in an old picture film. So I'm guessing almost like silent movie. Interesting. She says the air was thick. So that's interesting to me too. The red flag I'm getting here is that she was waking up, and this comes in a lot of the story. There's a lot of her waking up. So part of me does wonder if some of this, I'm not saying all of it, but some of it is very possibly sleep paralysis. So, and she mentions this later in the story where she'd wake up and not be able to move. It's just a psychological phenomena. where when you're sleeping, your brain basically paralyzes your body, so you don't get up and act out all your dreams. You'd never get any rest that way. So when you do fall asleep, your brain basically shuts your body down, like you can't move. And sometimes we wake up before the body is turned back on, essentially. And so you're conscious, you're awake mentally, but your body is still sleeping. And it could be very distressing to sort of feel trapped in your body because you're awake and you really can't open your eyes. You can't move your body. You just feel sort of trapped. You're paralyzed. It's sleep paralysis. Kind of the opposite of sleepwalking, where you're fully asleep, but your body's up and moving around and people talk to you and you don't remember the next day because you're asleep. You know, your mind is asleep, but your body's up acting out the dream. So kind of two ends of the spectrum there. But a lot of this sounds like sleep paralysis. And again, in sleep paralysis, people will report the hag sitting on their chest, alien abductions. A lot of people think alien abductions are sleep paralysis. And I've had sleep paralysis a few times. And even knowing what it was while it was happening to me, I could have sworn there were little creatures in my apartment kind of shuffling around. I didn't see them, but I could kind of hear them and just get that sense that there was something in my apartment. And I just had the sense that they were little creatures. So very much like a alien abduction. And again, I'm not saying all alien abductions are sleep paralysis. I don't know. And I'm not trying to, invalidate anyone's experience, but sleep paralysis is a thing. And I'll get into why some of this I don't think is sleep paralysis in a bit, but it's very possible because a lot of her experiences here happened when she was sleeping and waking up. And again, it doesn't mean that it's all sleep paralysis, but I do think that's a possibility for some of this. And again, there's some of this where she was not eating and feeling sick. And I've heard this a lot from a lot of different people when they start experiencing paranormal things, especially things that don't seem too pleasant. I don't want to say demonic because that word is just thrown around way too often, but these things that don't seem to be very nice. You know, this isn't, a dead grandmother visiting someone. This is a decaying old woman who has fiery eyes and, just doesn't seem to be a very pleasant entity. And then we fast forward to when she was 15. She started getting involved in witchcraft and occult stuff, which a lot of teenagers do. I think it's just a normal rite of passage for kids to get into, witchcraft and the dark stuff and Ouija boards and things like that. And she does mention that she got a spirit board from her father and she tried it out. Was also dabbling in some spells with her cousin. And again, a couple of nights later, she woke up with something growling in her ear. She couldn't move, but she could feel a presence. So again, this instance to me sounds very much like sleep paralysis. She did get the courage to open her eyes, and standing by her bed was a black hooded shadow figure. So could be sleep paralysis because she couldn't move. She's waking up. So it sounds to me almost like her brain woke up, but her body didn't. Black hooded shadow figure sounds a little bit like the Hat Man, and that's a story for another time, but a really weird phenomenon. So we're going to continue with the story here, but I just need to throw things out there that when I think it might be sleep paralysis. And again, I'm not saying it is. I don't know. I didn't have these experiences. So continuing her story. After a while, she moved across the street. She didn't think it would follow her, but it did. And I had mentioned a couple of episodes back that I don't really know anybody who's had experiences where it followed them, myself included. Like most of the paranormal activity I experienced in my life was in one home. And pretty much everybody else I know, if they've had things, it's been in one place. It doesn't really seem to follow them. And again, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It's just in my experience and in the experience of everyone I know, it doesn't seem to follow. It seems to be just in one place. But again, she says the same thing would happen. Something would growl in her ear to wake her up and she couldn't move. So again, it sounds a lot like sleep paralysis. She can't move. She's already sleeping. For me personally, when I experience something, when I've woken up or I'm sleeping or something wakes me up, I tend to discount it. I don't really talk about that stuff on the show. I don't really consider it paranormal, because it's just so easily something in the brain versus something in the real world. And again, maybe something really is happening, but when in doubt, you got to throw it out. You got to just say, I can't include this as a story that's paranormal, because it just too easily could have been a dream or sleep paralysis, waking dream, anything like that. So again, she wakes up, she sees two eyes staring down at her. It was glowing with slits like cat's eyes. And again, the hag of sleep paralysis sometimes is like a cat, like sucking the breath. I mean, that's the legend, the old world legend is that the cat is sitting on your chest and it's really a witch and it's sucking the breath out of you, and that's why you're paralyzed. So again, very possibly sleep paralysis. But I'm going to get to some other stuff here that sort of pricks my attention up here and says, maybe not. So she started babysitting. She started staying over her aunt's house, and the light over the bed. I talked about this a few weeks ago in one of my podcasts, that I had a very similar lamp that my grandparents had, where you touch, it was like a touch lamp, and you touch it, and the first touch it was dim, the second touch it was brighter, and then the third touch it would turn off. So she says the light was going nuts, to use her word, and act nuts, and went on, off, on, off. And again, she mentions the air got thick. So this one is interesting to me because she wasn't sleeping. She says she was trying to fall asleep, so she was awake. So situations like that, I tend to give a little bit more credence to, because you're not fully asleep yet. And so for me, I always pay attention to those stories when I know I'm wide awake. If I'm standing up, if I'm awake, if I'm kind of doing things and I'm already okay, I'm not going to start dreaming in the middle of that, probably, if I'm not already dreaming. Like if you're up and getting a drink of water or going to the bathroom or whatever you're doing, the dream is kind of done at that point. So for something to happen when you've been up for 10 minutes, in the middle of the night doing things, that's a little bit more interesting to me. I can't really chalk that up to sleep paralysis or waking dreams. You're already awake. And here she's saying she hasn't fallen asleep yet, and the light got weird and the air got thick. And I always tell people to pay attention. The best ghost hunting device is your own instincts. Like if you feel you're being watched, if you feel something's not right, your instincts are usually right. So she ran out of the room. She heard whispering coming from it. So now again, she's up, she's awake, she's moving. She hears whispering coming from her room, and later finds out that nobody was in that room. And it reminds me of my friend John's story from the Staten Island Ghost Stories episode, when he was saying he was up in the morning shaving, and he thought he heard his girlfriend and her brother talking outside the bedroom. He just kind of heard a murmur, muffled speech. He couldn't really make out words, but clearly two people talking. And then he finds out later that the brother hadn't gotten home yet and his girlfriend was still sleeping. So it reminded me of that, and those instances are always interesting to me, because when you're hearing a voice and there's nobody there, this isn't just a bang on the wall that you could chalk up to just, a pipe or the house settling. So interesting to me. And I just wanted to tie that into John's story. And I've had situations like that myself, where I've heard murmurs and, muffled speech that shouldn't have been there. So Gina goes on. She realized this thing was going to follow her everywhere she went back to her grandparents' house. Again, she was woken up with the growling and not able to move. Here's where things get a little more interesting, in my opinion, because sleep paralysis, for most people, is not a very vivid thing. It's more of a sense. You can't move, you can't really open your eyes, you're conscious, you just get a sense that there's something around you. Most people I know who've had sleep paralysis have not seen things. You can't even open your eyes for the most part, or if you can, it's very little. And everyone I know has gotten a sense of something. It's not that they've seen something, they sense that there's something in their room. They sense that there's an evil thing looking at them. They don't actually see it. This, she's saying, something sharp with nails touched her foot. So that sounds like a very visceral experience, not something like sleep paralysis, where you're more just getting a sense that there's something not right. There's something in the room. This sounds like something touched her. And again, she mentions that she heard some footsteps. She thought it was her father, but realized her father and brother were not home. So again, a very common thing for people to hear something, and your first thought is that this is very natural. Oh, it's my brother, it's my father, it's my mother. it's the cat. And then you realize, oh, wait, none of those people are home, or, the cat died 2 weeks ago. It couldn't be the cat. So interesting that I believe. Uh, Again, not being able to move, but she says in the doorway is a half man, half goat creature. And this sounds a little bit like Goat Man from cryptozoology, but it also sounds like Satan, or a demon. And again, I hate going there, but it's does not sound good. But it also has a little bit of a cliche sound to it. I mean, when you think of the devil, that's what everybody thinks of, is the sort of half man, half goat. Just that demonic archetype. Told her to go upstairs, and her grandmother wanted her. She ran upstairs where her grandmother was, and she was sleeping. So again, this could have been sleep paralysis, but I don't usually hear of too much of the vivid visuals and touch in sleep paralysis. Grandmother told her she was having reoccurring dreams about her signing the book with the devil. This reminds me of my friend Ethan, when he had an episode that he came on and told us about his experience with a cat squatch. It was almost like a Bigfoot creature, but with like a cat's face. And his grandmother was having some dreams about this creature. So that just sort of caught my attention too, that you have someone who's not experiencing this stuff necessarily, but having the dreams and sort of knowing what's going on in a way where they really shouldn't. And again, she's taking a nap, opened her eyes because she felt a presence. It was moving in a very animalistic way, not human-like. So again, you have the sleep thing here. You have, perhaps she's having a waking dream. Perhaps it's sleep paralysis. I don't know, but she's seeing a lot of things, which again is interesting to me. Doesn't prove things one way or the other. But again, she's doing some spells here with her cousin. She heard walking around the room. The fan turned off. So now they're awake. It's her and her cousin. They're doing stuff. The fan turns off. She had to plug it back in. They hear something that sounds almost like it's got hooves. So that's a little spooky. But again, we kind of get back to, eventually this thing started to wake her up and talk to her. It sounds evil. It sounds demonic. It doesn't sound like a good spirit, if that's what it is. But again, she was woke. That night I was woken up with the thing telling me it was going to come back. As she got older, she got married. She would have dreams about the goat man. Some of the dreams were disgusting. So this, I didn't get into this with her, but I'm assuming that this ties into something sexual, and perhaps, you hear stories about the succubus or the incubus, and that gets tied in a lot to sleep paralysis as well. But it has this sexual nature. But there's all these legends of the succubi and the incubi sort of having sex with people in their sleep. They wake up to an entity having sex with them. And these are people who live alone or are married and their spouse isn't home, and nothing should be having sex with them, but it's a very vivid sexual experience. So I don't want to read too much into that, but that's kind of where I think she was heading with that. But then she says a few years later, they bought a condo, things were peaceful. She got pregnant. And again, things would happen. She was woken up. She could hear something. She was worried about her son. So again, I'm going to focus a little bit more here on the time she was awake. One night I was lying in bed watching TV, and my son was in the basement. She noticed her TV was blacking out. Again, she's awake here. So I give a little bit more credibility to these stories when she was awake and experiencing things, electronic things. So I don't want to discount her story altogether. I appreciate that she wrote this. The skeptic in me has to sort of look at sleep paralysis as a possibility for some of these. I'm not saying all. I'm not saying it covers any of them. It's a possibility. I know some people who have sleep terrors, and their sleep can be really disrupted. I had sleep paralysis a bit when I was in college, and it was just, I think because I was working nights and going to school during the day, and my schedule's like a little bit weird, and I was able to sleep until like noon because my classes didn't start until 2 in the afternoon, and then I was working until 10, 11 o'clock at night and getting home and staying up late, and my whole day night schedule was shifted a few hours, and I would have sleep paralysis. So I don't know what was going on in her life, but there's clearly some stories with her cousin where she's awake, experiencing things, but there's a lot of stories where she's sleeping and being woken up by something. And most of those times she cannot move. So that sounds like sleep paralysis. I'm not discounting your story, Gina. Just as the skeptic in me has to sort of say, let's put that on the back burner because those may be psychological more than paranormal. The instances where she's seeing things, like very clearly seeing things, that's a little bit more concerning to me because, like I said, sleep paralysis is usually a very subtle thing. It's usually you get a sense, your eyes are closed, you can't move, you get a sense that there's something in the room with you or looking at you. So for her to say, I've seen this goat man or I saw this woman, that to me is a little bit more concerning and a little creepy. So let me know what you guys think, because those are just my thoughts. And again, I'm not saying I'm right. I'm not saying I'm wrong. I don't want to invalidate Gina's experiences because it does sound like she had some really weird experiences. But for me, sleep paralysis can cover some of these. So the skeptic in me has to sort of say, let's separate those. And the ones where she was sleeping have to be taken with a little bit more grain of salt than the other ones where she was awake and experienced, things turning off or lights flickering or the TV turning off. When you're awake and you're experiencing these things, that's a little different. So Gina, thank you for your story. I really appreciate it. These are, very spooky, but interesting things that happened to you. If any of you guys have a story you'd like to share, jason@utuntold.com. Shoot me an email. I will be happy to communicate with you. And again, we can just put your story on here. I can type it up. You can type it up. If you want to come on the show, you can come on the show. You don't have to show your face. I can change your name. All sorts of things. We can keep you anonymous if you like, but we do love hearing your stories. So again, let me know what you think Gina experienced. Let me know what you guys think of the UAP phenomenon. Before we go, I just want to give a couple of shout outs. One, my buddy Andy over at Spooky Island Radio. Really enjoying his podcast. He's been doing a lot of stuff on the Missing 411, and we're fellow podcasters, and we're trying to collaborate, and the timing is just not working out for us. So Andy, buddy, if you're listening, we got to get together soon. I'm sorry, summers are hard. I get it. It's been very busy for me, but I'm loving your show. I appreciate the shout out you gave me on the last Missing 411 from earlier this month or back in early July. But great stuff. I love the stories. I love listening to your show. Always put it on. And just wanted to give you a shout out and a plug for your show. So anybody who wants more cool paranormal stuff and cool stories, listener stories, Missing 411 stuff, with Bigfoot and disappearances in the woods of North America, go listen to Andy's show, Spooky Island Radio, link below. I also want to give a shout out to friend of the show, Mike Famalant. He's a Bigfoot researcher in New Jersey. He does the show on YouTube In the Shadow of Big Red Eye. We had an awesome conversation on the show many episodes back. I'll link to it below so you can check it out. But he's an awesome Bigfoot researcher, has some really unique and interesting perspectives. And I was just thinking about him yesterday. I was out hiking in New Jersey with the lovely Rebecca, and we were hiking kind of like in the northern Pine Barrens. And I posted on Instagram just that I was on the lookout for the Jersey Devil, and it just reminded me of Mike because he does a lot of Bigfoot research, but he's down in Jersey, so a lot of overlap with Jersey Devil stuff. And we talked a little bit about the Jersey Devil on our episode, just a wee bit. But very, very cool guy, and he's out there pounding the pavement looking for Bigfoot, and we had a really cool chat. So I'll link to it below. I'll put up a little thing at the end of this video where you can find his video where he was on our show. And I think that about wraps it up for this week. So again, everybody, hope you're having a great summer. It's been a little wild and wacky for me, so getting these episodes out has been a little bit tough, but trying to get them out every week. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Hope you guys are having a great summer. Until next week, everybody, rock and roll.